Every grain has a story to tell, and it's up to you to tell it.
Hey, welcome back. For today's project, my daughter is in need of a desk. So we're going to build her a desk. I've had this 6-foot long piece of poplar sitting in my shop for quite a while. Now, poplar is a great wood for painting, but it's not always a good wood for staining. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this great big piece and we're going to turn this 6-foot piece of poplar into a desktop that's going to be about 3 feet long because it's not a huge space. And we're going to stain this to make sure that we get a nice rich color out of it. For the legs for this project, we're probably going to use a pine, but haven't decided that yet. So let's see how it goes. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our 6-foot piece and we're going to cut it down into a more manageable length. So with this piece here, we're just shy of 72 inches. So we're actually going to be cutting this down towards 35 inches on each piece. So it's actually going to be just below 36 inches, but it's all good because that's what the space is going to fit. So now that we've got these pieces cut down to our 35 inches, before we do anything else, we're going to get out our planing sled and we're going to get these things wedged up and run them through the planer so that way we can get a nice flat side, and then we'll flip it over, take it off, and then do the same on the other side. Then we can look at ripping it down so the ends are square and start our laminating. Now, fortunately, this board doesn't actually have a lot of rock to it, which is really good. So we're only going to put a little wedge in the corner. Now, tip, what I like to use when I'm wedging these things is I use these little flooring wedges. You can actually buy these in a kit. But these things are absolutely amazing for wedging pieces that are going to go through a planer because the tip of this goes down to about a 1/16 of an inch. So now that our hot glue gun is warmed up, what we're going to do is we're going to put kind of a bead of hot glue at the 4 corners at least. So when you're going to be running pieces through the planer, one of the things to not forget is hearing protection, because these things are really loud no matter what planer that you've got. So just make sure you've got something to protect your ears. So now what we're going to do is we're going to run it back through the planer, but because we got a flat side, we're going to take our flat side, we're going to face it down, and that's going to cause this side to become parallel with this side, which is exactly what we want. And then we can look at putting it through the table saw. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do with this is we don't necessarily need a 2 or 2¼ inch thickness. So I'm going to try to get this down a little bit further because I want to be able to take off this wane edge of the wood here. So that way it's nice and squared. So we're going to have to take off a little bit. So with our piece here, we've taken this down to 1 3/4 inches, and that's where we're going to leave it. So it's actually a nice thick top. Now, while we're waiting for the glue gun to heat up again, so that way I can plane down the second piece, one thing I want to show you is that I was originally going to be using these pieces of pine here. These are pieces of pine that I believe, and I'll measure it here, almost 4 inches thick. So they're pretty thick. Now, challenge with these was they were sitting in my lean-to, and so they've been air drying for about 10 years. They're not kiln dried, but they've had some exposure to moisture. So whenever you're going to be milling or using rough lumber, I highly suggest that you get one of these. This is a moisture meter. It was about $40 on Amazon, so it wasn't that much. And all you do with these is you simply turn it on, select the wood setting, and then it's got a couple of pins here at the top, and you simply poke it into the end of the piece of wood. I did that with these ones, and these ones here came out at 19.5% moisture, which is way too high. Ideally, anything that we're using for furniture, we want it in the single digits, below 10 anyways. So with these pieces of poplar, they've been in my shop now for a couple of years. They were a 9% moisture. So that to me was acceptable. Hence the reason why we're using poplar for this project. All right, so one of the reasons I cut these down to a more manageable length initially, even though this is going to be around the actual length of this desk, is because I wanted to be able to fit them on my jointing sled, which is going to go through the table saw in order to give us one square edge. That way we can take it off, flip it over, run the square edge along the fence, and now we've got a square edge on both sides. So it's going to work out perfect. So for this, because we're not too far out of square, all I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up so that way whatever corner of this piece of wood is further in is going to be roughly lined up with the edge of this jointing jig. And then once we do that, we're going to take these micro jig clamps and we're going to clamp it down. I'll put a link up top to a video that I did where we're going through and talking and showing about this jointing jig in a little bit more detail. So we're going to set our fence to 10 inches. Then we're going to take our piece, bring it over to the blade. We want to make sure this blade's going to stick up, in which case this here it does. Now what we're going to do, just to be on the safe side, is we're going to measure the distance from here to the inside of the carbide teeth to make sure we're sitting at 10. Now we're going to turn this piece around, and this edge is going to run along the fence. This edge is going to get cut off. So let's get it done. So now let's take this piece off of here, and what we're going to do, we're going to check this corner edge for square on both sides, and we are bang on. That's good. So what that means, this side here is going to go on the fence. So we're going to put an F on that. That way we know which side is going to go there. So we're going to get our other piece into the jointing jig. We're going to do the exact same thing. And we'll get these ripped down on both sides, and then we can start laminating them together. Okay, so there we go. Now we've got both of our pieces milled down. And we're going to double check, but this is beautiful because we are dead on square to a machinist square on all sides. All right, so now that we've got everything squared off, and actually off camera, I had to take these back over to the miter saw because I forgot now that we had the square faces, we'd have to square the edges as well. So I've done that. Next thing we're going to do is join these and laminate these together. Now, this is not a big surface and might be a little bit overkill. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Jessam doweling jig. And I'm going to put about 5 dowels all the way through this. Dowels that are going to be a fair size. They're the 3/8 of an inch. Unfortunately, I don't have the adapter for 1/2 inch, so I can't use 1/2 inch dowels. So we're going to put some 3/8 dowels in. We're going to put 5 of them all the way along. Now, because these are 1 3/4 thick, 7/8 is direct center for these pieces. Now, the other thing on these pieces is I've got them marked. So if you look right here, I've got it written as top, 1 with an arrow pointing. And then I've got this one, same thing, top 1 with an arrow pointing in the opposite direction. The reason why that's important when we're doing doweling is we want those facing each other is because we're going to flip one piece up like this. We're going to flip the other piece up like that. And when we do these dowels, we're going to do this one on this side, and we're going to do this one from this side. All right, so now we've got everything drawn out. We've got a line coming down here where we're going to put the dowel on both sides because we're going to be lining it up with this right here, which says center line. So all we're going to do, set this on top. We're going to line it up with the mark and then clamp it like that. And as we can see, even though it started to go crooked, that's why you always clamp on the bottom, clamp on the top, so that you got pressure on both sides. But with this being 1.75 inches thick, I mean, we are perfectly straight all the way across. Our joints are completely joined because we took the time to mill this down properly. So now all we got to do is wait and we can move on to the frame. All right, so now that for the most part the top of this desk is done, the next thing that I did is I went through my wood pile that I've got a little bit more, and I happen to find another piece of this pine right here in front of me that is about 3.5 inches thick. It's actually 3 5/8. And the moisture content on this one is a lot lower. So what we're going to do first, because we are less than 48 inches in length, we're actually only 35 inches. And for our overall height for the desk, we're going to want around 30 inches to the top. So our legs, of course, are going to be somewhere around 28.25 in length. So this is really good for the legs, and I can divide this up in 4, and then we're going to put some skirts in between also. But the first thing that we're going to have to do, because this one's been sitting for a little while, is it's got a rock in it. So we're going to break out the planer sled again, and we're going to get this nailed down. So I won't show you that part because I've already shown you the planer sled and the top going through, but let's get to that point and get these legs made. Okay, so I took that big chunk of pine that I had, and I got that planed down. I went to a thickness of 2 3/4 inches. And then once I had that, I did 2 3/4 inches because I knew with the width of that piece that I could get at least 4 legs that were 2 3/4 inches squared out of that one piece, which is exactly what I did. And so now I've got 4 of these legs, which is perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. Okay, so one thing that I realized is by these pieces being 2 3/4 inches, and my jointing jig being 3/4 inches high, my 10-inch blade is actually not tall enough, doesn't go up high enough to cut all the way through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these legs and I'm going to trim them down to 2 inches square, which will give me enough room to do a taper with my jointing jig. Okay, so I've got the legs all cut down to 2 inches, which is really going to work good because when I put them on top of the jointing jig, which I'm going to use for tapering, my saw blade's going to be able to cut through them. So perfect. Now, to show you what I did, these are 2 inches by 2 inches. I'm going to be, for this taper, trimming off a 1/2 inch. So I've marked here and here. And I've also, because I'm going to do it at 16 inches up, I've also put a line around all sides. And what I'm going to be doing as I run this through the jig, so these are going to be in line with the blade, okay? There's going to be a one facing out, and that's how I know that is the side, well, to be facing out, I guess. As you can see, what I've done here is this is going to be lined up with this edge, and then over here, this is lined up with the edge of this jig. So if you have a look at that, that actually turned out pretty good. We've got our taper here, and that is going to be the inside corner for this desk. So I'll do the rest of them, and then we'll get to the skirt. Because we've got these 5/8 thick pieces, the perfect purpose for these, and there's 4 of them, is we're going to make these the skirts in between the legs. We're going to have 2 pieces that are 28 5/8 of an inch that are going to be going in between. And then on the short pieces of the skirt, that is on the depth portion, we're going to have 2 pieces that are 9 7/8 of an inch. When we assemble it, we're going to be using pocket holes. As you can see here, we've got all of our skirt pieces now cut. We're going to use the 1/2 inch depth setting on it. We're going to put 2 holes on each end of this skirt. So 2 here, and that's going to be all the way around. The other thing that we're going to do with this is we're going to be putting pocket holes down. And so we're going to put one here, and one here, because we're going to be using pocket holes to secure this when the skirt and the legs and everything are done, that's how we're going to secure it to the tabletop. Before sanding, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our pocket holes in. Once we've got the pocket holes in, then we're going to move on to sanding these pieces down to get them prepped pretty good, and we'll go from there. Then we'll look at assembly. So when I do this, I just use a quick clamp and hold it down there, and then I'll flip it around, put the jig on this side, and then put the clamp on that side as well. Entirely up to you to how you do it. Also, when I do this, I hold the handle just to give a little bit of extra pressure. So that's going to be the inside. This is going to be the outside. Now, the other thing that we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just do this now while I'm here. Placement for this doesn't need to be perfect, but I'm going to go ahead and put a hole vertically so that it's done. When we assemble this frame together, we're going to assemble the two long sides first, then we're going to stand them up, and then we're going to assemble the smaller skirts in between, just to make it a little bit easier. Now, what I've done here, in order to make sure that I get everything lined up, is I put a piece of wood along here that is actually longer than the entire assembly. The reason for that is because when I secure it all together, then all I have to do is pull it tight and flush with this piece. I've also got some walnut scraps from another project that I did that happen to be exactly a 1/4 inch thick. So by putting these here underneath, it's going to raise it up exactly to where it needs to be. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be gluing these seams, and then I'm going to be using pocket holes here. I've got 1.25 inch coarse thread pocket holes because it's a softwood. I'm going to use coarse thread, and let's see how this turns out. We've now got everything connected, and it looks really good. We're almost ready to assemble this table. So what I've done, and if you've got either a combination square or one of these tools here, the easiest way that I've found to center this is, well, obviously knowing the overall dimensions. So we're between 1 1/16 and 1 inch on these sides, and that's on all 4 sides, and then 1 inch and 1/8 at the end. So I must have left a bit of blade width on, but that's okay. It's not going to throw us off too much. And so when you're doing this, you can actually just take this and go like that and push it up against the leg in order to get it square at every point. So that's the easiest way to do it. We're going to put the rest of these in just to hold this top on. So we've now got our top on here, and I've just flipped it over just so you can see really quick, but it is looking really, really good. We're going to be staining it with some oil-based black wood stain because what I want to do here is accentuate the green and make it pop a little bit, but I do want this to be dark, so we're going to do that with the entire thing. Okay, so we're almost done this project. We've got our tabletop on here, our 1 3/4 thick poplar. We're going to run a tack cloth over this because I sanded this up to a 320 just because I had some. So we're going to run a tack cloth over it, get the excess dust off. That way it's not going to affect our staining. And then once we've stained this black, then we're going to do one of two things. We're probably going to put a coat of oil on it, I think, to give it a little bit of a sheen and help protect it. Or we'll use some polyurethane. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's stained. So now that I'm covered in black stain, I'm going to show you what it looks like. And man, it is sharp. Look at that. That is one coat of this Varathane black oil-based stain, and it is just phenomenal. Now, we're not done with this. We're going to be putting an oil coat on it as well once the stain sets, but my God, it covered up that green and the poplar, the pine, and everything just beautifully. So we are almost done. So I let the stain cure for 24 hours, and then I decided to use a polyurethane finish to give it a little bit more protection as opposed to the oil. But before I did a couple coats of polyurethane finish on this, I took some super fine steel wool to it to actually lighten up some of the black on the top and make that grain pop a little bit more. But overall, like, this project just turned out beautiful. Thanks so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed the project. And don't forget to leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think about this project, or if there's anything that you do differently. Remember to like the video and share it with anybody else that might benefit from this, that needs a desk. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, happy cutting.